So what is our case study? Elsie is 18 years old and has been brought to our service by her Aunt Rosie. Your role is an initial assessment and planning worker, or an IAP, at a community housing organisation. So what our role here is to assist clients to identify access to suitable housing options and to link them with appropriate supports and resources. So Elsie is 18 years old and has been brought into our agency by her Aunt Ruby, as previously stated. Ruby has explained that Elsie has been living with her for about 6 months before she was and before that she was moving regularly between various relative and friends' houses. She has not lived at home with her parents since she was 15, as Ruby explains that it was not safe or a supportive place for her. Ruby explains that Elsie can't keep living with her for too much longer as her house is overcrowded and she has 5 children of her own. She wants Elsie to get her own place as she's been told that your agency has houses. So this is what our problem is here, and this is what we need to address for the client. So let's discuss what we know and what we don't know about the client. Our client is Elsie, and so this is what we know about the client. Elsie is of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander descent. She's 18 and lives in Wodonga. Elsie described her home situation as unsafe and unsupportive. She has experienced secondary homelessness from the ages of 15 to 17 and a half. And her high school education is that she's completed Year 10. She currently lives with her aunt, Ruby, and Ruby's 5 children, and has done that for the last 6 months. Ruby describes the house as overcrowded, and Elsie has an older brother working in the mines in Western Australia, and an older sister who is partnered and has 2 children in Shepparton. So now that we know what we know about Elsie, it's also important to discuss what is unknown about the client. So what we don't know about the client is we don't know her goals or aspirations with regards to study or work. We don't know why she left home and school. We don't know if there's any trauma that she's suffered. We don't know why her home is unsafe or unsupportive. We also need to question, is she receiving Centrelink benefits, which is another thing that we don't know about the client. Does Elsie want to get her own house, or does she want to live with other people, which is an important question when assessing her housing situation. We don't understand her relationship with her family, and we're not sure about her connection to her culture and her identity. So when working with this client, it's also important to consider other areas that may be of importance. The 3 that we have highlighted is that she's of a youth or adolescent age group, that she is a woman, and there may be trauma. So what does that mean for this client? So considering that she had a period of secondary homelessness when she was in her youth, she may have experienced breakdown of her family structure and because of her siblings moving away. These may have previously been her supports. Elsie may not have developed age-appropriate life skills as she's moved with family and friends and family members. She's also experienced tertiary homelessness and a period of transience, which may have created challenges accessing school and continuing her education. Considering the impacts of not finishing school is also important because it can also impact her employment and what that might mean for her. It's also important to consider that Elsie is a woman, and so women are more likely to access services, and it's also important to consider that family violence is the main reason that women access services. It's also important to note that trauma may be another area to consider when working with this client. So Elsie may have impaired social functioning. Potential impaired development is also something to consider. And we need to understand how much change is being presented to this client and if this is going to be a worthwhile solution for this client. We also need to make sure that we're using a trauma-informed care approach to practice when working with this client to get the best results for the client.
Working with a client is in collaboration and building rapport and trust, forming the basis of a centred approach in critical theory. The facilitators enable clients to identify and work towards their individual goals. The foundation of this process is engagement, assessment, and putting the correct interventions in place. Elsie is our client, and as with most clients, it is important that our efforts be directed towards helping her achieve her current needs and future wishes. There are several aspects of Elsie's circumstances taking into consideration. Firstly, she's of Aboriginal descent, and therefore awareness of her cultural sensitivities relate to our interactions with both both Elsie and Ruby. Secondly, ensuring Elsie is given adequate forum to identify and give voice to her own wishes. She has spoken little and looked withdrawn whilst her auntie spoke on Elsie's behalf. So therefore, an assessment allowing the social worker to engage and build rapport with Elsie as an individual may be warranted. The model assessment we are using is from Yes Unlimited. And it will be assumed that Elsie has expressed the wishes to communicate on her own behalf. The assessment model allows communication which is not invasive, the opportunity for Elsie to express her needs via the 5 foundations of safety, housing, connections, health and well-being, and education or work in a safe and comfortable environment. We are a homeless service and may not be able to provide all required services necessary for Elsie, and in these circumstances, referral is appropriate. Engaging with Elsie in a relaxed manner, we are able to make an informed assessment regarding Elsie's expressed wishes and refer to the appropriate services. This assessment includes the use of a genogram, family mapping, or to identify the most important people presently in her life, giving her the chance to express her relationship and connections with each individual and speak freely without judgment. The time frame outlining significant times in her life, whether positive or negative experience, inform the social worker regarding her life experiences. It also assesses whether the trauma of leaving her parents' house is affecting her currently, and if it is necessary, to refer her to a mental health service for an assessment. The social worker assesses Elsie's capacity and desire for independent living. We are using a client-centred approach, and it is necessary to ensure her future ambitions are taken into account with respect to any goal setting, identifying the client's strength and approaches that are effective regarding her past by using a multidimensional approach. Therefore, we must be aware of what does Elsie want. Does she wish to live on her own with her sister in Shepparton, or remain at Ruby's and trying to get a bigger house, which means we have to put other things in place, or does she want to live in transitional housing? So the agency can provide help and advocate on her behalf with any of these things. We must try and find out what benefits she's entitled to, because has she got the ability to afford accommodation? Does Elsie have aspirations for future education, and do we need to help her find somewhere to help her with this, as barriers that have been addressed and identified by Mission Australia is the financial difficulties or academic ability and otherwise family responsibilities. Does Elsie wish to engage with the mental health service? Does she want to talk and speak about her trauma and where to go from there? The interventions we have put in place is we are identifying that she might require crisis accommodation for transitional housing to stabilise where she is. We are identifying that she may require intensive period of support to regain her independence, which therefore she may need assistance with skills for daily living, like financial support and things like that. And she may require floating support for longer term to ensure that tenancy is sustained with her. Now, Elsie has expressed that she's not ready for further education, and when she is in long-term accommodation, she will address this again, but she would like to find a job if possible, and we have put her in touch and referred her to Gateway Health Services, which has an Indigenous job seeking service. Elsie has been referred to the Centrelink social worker to assess all possible entitlements and support services Centrelink are able to provide for her. Gateway Health Services can provide services which are sensitive to the Aboriginal culture, especially regarding her health and well-being. They have programs which put Elsie in touch with other people her age and engage in a healthy way. And even though Elsie has not expressed presently the need for a mental health referral, a gateway, they are able to monitor her health, her well-being via these programs, and then put mental health services in place. Using Druid Hudson model of professional social work practice includes the empirical, procedural, personal and theoretical knowledge and practice wisdom using the accumulation of information and knowledge gained to gain an understanding of homelessness and other issues in practice for creating the best possible realistic outcome for the client. Empirical knowledge is knowledge of the report, statistic and general housing relating issues that we are addressing. In this case, overcrowding issues, which are culturally based laws and customs, are put in practice, where it is not unknown to have family stay with family for over a longer period of time. Critically informed, we are using this research and resources such as the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute. Procedural knowledge, how can we fit the wishes of a client with the agency's policies and procedures and how legislation works. The waiting lists and work within the guidelines by using our systems-based approach. Our practice wisdom is using individual knowledge and networks at the best of our ability to get what is required for the clients. It's a right-based approach. Personal knowledge, using our intuition, cultural knowledge and common sense regarding homelessness to apply to each case and our personal integrity. Theoretical knowledge is how the theory has been applied and explained, and including the oppression, structural and influences of the environment. Client-focused or client-centred approach on how we best inform and help the client regarding possible. Towers, client-centred approach explanation of promote self-determination in terms of Elsie's outcomes and goal setting, and therefore we are using all this professional knowledge regarding the engagement, assessment and intervention program for Elsie.
As Chloe outlined at the beginning of the presentation, we already know what is going on for the client. Through conceptualising the problem, we gain a better idea of the issues, which guide on how to proceed. Elsie's accommodation with Ruby is time limited. Based on assessments and trauma-informed practice, it is not best practice for the client to gain private accommodation in which she is unsupported. If the client was to move into transitional housing, it would allow her to receive formal supports and continue to engage with the service while she adjusts to living on her own. It is important to assist Elsie with this transition, so when she leaves transitional housing, she has the necessary skills and knowledge to live independently. In our organisation, social justice is the central value that is embodied in our practice methods. We do this by drawing upon relevant theories to inform our approaches to engagement, assessment, and intervention. Critical social work is centred around the recognition that people are constrained, influenced, and oppressed by social structures and the environment. Allen, Pease, and Briskman write that critical social theory aims to empower people through giving insight into the impact of societal structures. As social workers practicing from this theory, our role is to identify and overcome challenges that exist due to the power structures. Through using critical theory, it enables the organisation to undertake a multidimensional analysis. As seen throughout the analysis, critical theory has assisted us to recognise personal, cultural, and structural dimensions of oppression. The work of Healy and Connolly and Harms have been essential in informing the formation of our response to problems that the client is faced with. Specific examples of our use of critical social work theory can be identified through looking at our approach to practice. We have been able to acknowledge Elsie's disadvantage due to her journey, including consideration of her history. While we have been critical of the current structures and policies, we have been able to work in a way which uses the existing structures to provide equal opportunities for the client, including the provision of transitional housing. Elsie is one individual from what can be considered a vulnerable population group. Our assessment identified possible abuse or violence, a young person at risk, the impact of trauma, being female, living in a regional area, and being from an Indigenous population. These factors compound for clients like Elsie, and our organisation draws upon critical theory to provide equal opportunities and to seek social justice. In our practice, we are working in a way to overcome the unfairness caused by unequal access to economic resources. As an organisation driven by critical theory, we strive to advocate to overcome structural barriers in order to ensure service users are able to thrive in all aspects of their life. Although we have drawn on critical social work theory to inform our practice, we recognise the model is not always appropriate to high-risk decision-making, as recognised by Foote. Elsie's situation was carefully considered, and it was understood that she is not at immediate risk of harm. We have also been able to recognise the limitation of critical social work to consider individual psychological factors and the effects of human agency. In recognising these limitations, we were led to use other theories that assist us to consider other aspects of Elsie's life and our professional practice in order to carry out a holistic approach to intervention.
Following on from Tegan's discussion on critical theory and how it has informed our practice with Elsie, I will discuss the other theories and practice approaches we will use. Feminist theory is an aspect of critical theory and is used to explain and respond to the oppressed position of women in society. A feminist perspective in critical social work practice is necessary as it is a criticism of gendered social assumptions in both personal relationships and social institutions. Critical feminist theory also gives priority to complex interpersonal and personal experience as an expression of oppression and a contributor to social change. It considers how the social and economic structures around a person have contributed to their oppression. This is critical in Elsie's case, as it is her circumstances and experiences combined with structural factors that has led to her entering this housing service. Feminist theory strongly influences our intervention and assessment of Elsie and how we plan to work with her to improve her housing situation, as we are seeing how the system and her interpersonal experiences have led to her experiencing unstable housing. Feminist theory will also contribute to our ongoing approach to working with Elsie to assist us in taking an anti-oppressive and inclusive approach to working with a vulnerable young person. This understanding of structural and social factors will allow us to be compassionate towards Elsie and her circumstances while working with her. We also believe that taking a strengths-based approach to Elsie's case is critical. At our initial meeting, Elsie was very withdrawn and could not engage, so we are looking to use a strengths-based approach to empower Elsie and help her build independence and confidence. A strengths-based social work approach is focused on understanding the person as a whole and using their strengths and knowledge they already have to empower them. It is critical for the worker using this approach to reflect on and challenge assumptions and perceived weaknesses that may arise while working with the client, especially when the client has a history of trauma, mental illness, or hardship. We also chose to pair a trauma-informed approach with a strengths-based approach. Trauma-informed practice means being aware that clients could have a history of trauma, regardless of whether the client presents as a survivor of trauma or not. However, it is important to note that this approach does not mean each intervention will be focused on that trauma. It is more focused on helping practitioners understand a client's behaviour and situation based on the possibility of past victimization. Knight notes that clients who have experienced trauma find it challenging to enter into therapeutic relationships or services. This is applicable to Elsie, as her withdrawn behaviour and unstable housing may be influenced by her trauma and the flow-on effects of these experiences. A trauma-informed approach will be helpful when working with Elsie, as we want to be compassionate and understanding of her experiences while helping her transition to independent living. The combination of these practice theories will allow us to work with Elsie to promote growth and change. Feminist theory will allow us to work with Elsie while considering the social and structural barriers she faces, such as age, race, and gender, and working towards making sure she has equal opportunities to grow and change. As a form of critical theory, it will also allow us to recognize the different dimensions of oppression Elsie may face. The strengths-based and trauma-informed practice approaches will shape our interactions and interventions with Elsie, so that we can draw on her individual strengths and qualities, as well as assist her in rebuilding a sense of control and empowerment.
There can be many challenges in practice, and this can extend to all clients and members of the organisation, and further then into the community. A major challenge for housing at this current time is the lack of suitable properties to house people. This is not just a localised issue or a state problem, but one that extends throughout the whole of Australia. The appropriateness of properties for intended tenants is a challenge too. For example, it would not be suitable for a single man to be housed in a 4-bedroom house, nor an elderly person who is oxygen dependent to be housed in an apartment on the 2nd floor or higher with only a staircase for access. Armed with this knowledge, it needs to be applied when considering the specific type of accommodation that would best suit Elsie. Elsie's cultural beliefs and practices and her connection to her community need to be factored into the decisions made with and for her. Social workers will engage anti-racism and anti-oppressive practice principles and have knowledge or seek knowledge of how best to provide her with a culturally appropriate and safe accommodation that meets her needs. Studies have shown that with Indigenous people, more often than not, the important needs of family and friendships are more important than. Confidentiality is a critical component of any professional practice. The Australian Association of Social Workers has a code of ethics which clearly outlines what is acceptable for best practice, and it strives for the protection of the client's right to privacy. Organisations will add to this in the form of their own policies and procedures, and social workers will ensure their practice offers security and privacy for their clients for the duration of that client and further. Confidentiality is a legal matter covered by legislation. A breach of confidentiality can lead to prosecution and, in severe cases, even jail time. There is often a need to share information with other organisations or other people to provide the best possible outcomes for the client. But this cannot be done unless permission is gained from each individual client or someone acting on their behalf or advocating for them for their best interest. Elsie has her Aunt Ruby with her but our organisation still requires permission from Elsie to include Ruby in any discussions or treatment plans. Elsie is 18 years old, and it has been determined that she has the cognitive capacity to give this permission with the understanding of what it means. In relation to Elsie, our organisation must be able to deliver a quality service, which includes asking Elsie what information she would like to share and with whom she would like to share it with. Client self-determination is important and must not be overlooked. Elsie can feel empowered and valued as a person just by having someone listen to her and working with her to try to deliver the best positive outcome for her. She can start to build up her self-confidence as well as feel secure that she is accessing a culturally sensitive service.